I met Lydia in college, back when I was 21 and still figuring out who I was. She was 2 years younger, a sophomore majoring in marketing with a minor in French, of all things. I remember the first time I saw her. She was sitting on the quad, sketching in a little notebook. I was supposed to be meeting a study group, but I walked right past them, sat down beside her, and asked her what she was drawing. She looked at me like I was crazy and said, "People." That was her thing. She liked drawing strangers and imagining their stories. We ended up talking for 2 hours, missing everything we had planned that day. I asked her out for coffee, and that turned into dinner, and that turned into us being pretty much inseparable for the rest of college. Lydia was sharp, funny, and didn't let me get away with anything. I liked that about her. Still do. We got married 3 years after graduation. Nothing too fancy, a small ceremony in her parents' backyard. Just close friends and family, barbecue on paper plates, fairy lights in the trees. It was one of the happiest days of my life. We were young, broke, and completely sure we'd figure it out together. And we did. I started my HVAC business with a beat-up truck, a few loyal clients, and more hours than I care to count. Lydia worked in retail management for a few years, then took a break when our daughter, Sophie, was born. That was 16 years ago now. Feels like a blink. These days, our life is pretty steady. I run the business full-time, it's grown a lot, and I've got a few good guys working for me now. Lydia went back to work part-time once Sophie hit middle school. She manages a local boutique and loves it. Says it makes her feel like herself again. I always encouraged her to chase that feeling. She deserves to have something that's hers. We live in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town. 2-story house, 3 bedrooms, a little garden Lydia tends to when she's not too busy. She planted lavender by the front steps last spring, and now it smells incredible every time I come home from work. On Sundays, we do pancakes. On Friday nights, it's movie night, though lately Sophie prefers to hang out in her room, scrolling her phone with her headphones on. Still, she shows up for popcorn. I've always thought of us as a simple family in the best way. We work hard. We laugh. We argue over what takeout to get. There's nothing fancy about it, but it's ours. Or at least, it was. If I'm being honest, I always thought Lydia and I had one of those quiet, steady marriages that didn't need a spotlight. We weren't flashy, we didn't post long anniversary captions on social media, and we didn't gush about each other in public. But in our own way, we were solid. We built a life together, little by little, year after year, and we made it work. I've been running my HVAC business for almost a decade now. Built it from the ground up. Long hours in the beginning, sure, but I was proud of it. Still am. These days, I've got a small crew I trust, regular clients, and enough flexibility to be home most evenings. I liked being the kind of guy who could fix a broken thermostat and still make it home in time for dinner. Lydia would tease me about how much pride I took in being the guy with the flashlight and duct tape, but she always said it with a smile. She worked part-time managing a local boutique. It wasn't a big corporate job or anything like that, just a locally owned place with nice lighting, overpriced candles, and way too many throw pillows. But it gave her something she could claim as hers. Something that wasn't about being a wife or a mother. She liked that. I liked that she liked it. I never once felt threatened by her independence. At home, our rhythm was predictable, but it worked. Lydia handled most of the household stuff, scheduling appointments, organizing Sophie's school events, making sure we didn't run out of coffee or toilet paper. I took care of the car repairs, lawn work, and anything that needed fixing around the house. She loved to decorate, and I gave her free rein. Whatever made the house feel like her space, I was fine with. Our living room changed colors every few years. She'd repaint on a whim, sometimes dragging Sophie into it. They made a weekend project out of it, laughing with paint rollers in their hands while I stood there pretending I wasn't going to get dragged into helping. And Sophie, God, she grew up fast. 16 now, taller than Lydia, with that same fiery look in her eyes. She's smart, witty, a little too sarcastic sometimes, but that's Lydia's influence. They're close, the two of them. Always have been. I've always admired their bond, even when it meant feeling like a third wheel in my own house. But that's how it goes with teenage daughters, I figured. It was normal. It just made me happy to see them happy. We weren't perfect. No couple is. But I thought we were happy in the kind of way that matters. The kind of happy you don't question. Comfortable. Familiar. Safe. Our friends always said we were that couple, the ones who made it look easy. Lydia had this way of making everything feel put together, even when life was messy. She remembered birthdays, brought little snacks for Sophie's friends when they came over, and still packed me lunch sometimes with sticky notes that said, "Drink water," or "Don't forget sunscreen." So yeah, if you had told me back then that anything was off, I would have laughed. Because to me, life was just good. Simple. Ours. I didn't know I was walking around in a dream that someone else was already waking up from. I always thought one of the quiet joys of life was in the routines. Not the grand moments. Those are rare, but the small, steady ones that build your life without you even realizing it. For us, mornings had a rhythm. Lydia liked waking up before the rest of us. She'd light one of those ridiculous woodsy-scented candles, drink her coffee slowly by the kitchen window, and scroll through her phone. Sometimes she'd hum to herself, always the same tune, like a lullaby for no one. Sophie hated mornings, so I was usually the one dragging her out of bed, joking that she was genetically incapable of waking up before 7:45. It was our little dance, me knocking on her door, her pretending she couldn't hear me, and eventually both of us laughing while I bribed her with breakfast. In the evenings, we'd all be in different parts of the house but still felt like we were together. Lydia would be in the bedroom reading or watching those home renovation shows she loved. Sophie would be doing homework or pretending to while texting under the desk, and I'd be on the back porch unwinding with a beer, checking in on work emails or just sitting with my thoughts. It wasn't loud or exciting, but it was ours, and I genuinely believed we were content. I didn't need fireworks. I didn't want grand gestures or dramatic declarations. I liked the way Lydia would put her cold feet on my legs when we got into bed. I liked how Sophie would steal my hoodies and act like she hadn't, even when they practically swallowed her whole. I liked how Lydia would still ask me if I wanted something from the store, even when she was only picking up a few things. It was those little signs, you know? The quiet ways people say, "I still see you." Every so often, we'd have game nights. Lydia always won. Not because she cheated, but because she knew how to read us. She knew when I was bluffing, knew how to get Sophie riled up in just the right way to throw her off. Watching the two of them team up to take me down during Monopoly became a tradition. I played along, pretended to be outraged, but I loved it. I loved being the bad guy, if it meant hearing them laugh together. Looking back, I held on tight to those things. Those little rituals. I think I believed that if you just kept showing up, kept loving your family in quiet, steady ways, it would always be enough. I believed that if you gave people a good home, stayed faithful, supported their dreams, and never strayed, then the foundation would hold. That it was strong enough to carry us through anything. I know now how naive that sounds. But back then, I didn't doubt a thing. I didn't see the cracks forming. Not yet. A few months ago, I hit what I thought was a proud milestone. Sophie got accepted into her first-choice college, a well-regarded university out of state. And even though the price tag made my stomach flip, I didn't hesitate. I've been saving for years. Every extra job, every overtime weekend, every missed vacation went into that fund. And now, it was finally happening. My daughter, the girl I taught to ride a bike and helped with science fair projects, was going to chase her dreams. Lydia was over the moon. She told everyone. Her coworkers, the neighbors, even the woman at the checkout line in Target. And I could tell Sophie was proud too, though she tried to play it cool, as teenagers do. We took her out to dinner to celebrate. I watched them across the table, laughing about dorm life and decorating ideas, and I remember thinking, this is what it's all for. This is the reward. A few weeks later, we made a big decision. Well, I did. Lydia's old car had been giving her trouble for months, and it felt like the right time to do something about it. So I surprised her. I went to the dealership, picked out something practical but nice, a clean, silver SUV with low mileage, and brought it home with a bow on it. Sophie filmed it on her phone, and Lydia looked genuinely shocked. Her hands were over her mouth, eyes wide like a kid on Christmas morning. I remember that night vividly. She hugged me, long and tight, whispered, "You're too good to me," in my ear. I kissed her forehead and said, "You deserve it." And I meant it. Every word. I never once thought I was being taken advantage of. I never questioned whether she appreciated it. Looking back now, I've replayed that night a dozen times in my head, trying to figure out if there was something in her eyes I missed. Something in her voice that didn't quite match the moment. But all I can remember is the warmth of her arms and the way Sophie laughed while filming us, joking that we were too corny. That was the last time I truly felt like everything was still okay. After that, life just kept moving. Sophie started preparing for college, shopping for supplies, FaceTiming her soon-to-be roommate, practicing laundry like it was rocket science. Lydia was busier too. The boutique had extended hours, or so she said. She came home tired, sometimes quiet. I didn't think much of it. Everyone was adjusting. Change is exhausting, right? But I did start noticing little things. Not red flags, not yet. Just changes. Lydia started checking her phone more when she thought I wasn't looking. She laughed at messages, but never told me who they were from. Sophie, too, seemed a little more distant. Not rude, not cold, just distracted. Preoccupied. I chalked it up to transition. A house preparing for change. A wife with a full plate. A daughter getting ready to leave the nest. I didn't want to be that guy, paranoid or controlling. I trusted them. Fully. I was proud of the life we had. I believed we were just tired. That's all. Still, something in the air had shifted. I just couldn't name it yet. It started small. Isn't that how it always begins? At first, it was little things I didn't even realize I was noticing. Like how Lydia started locking her phone. That might not sound strange to most people, but for us, it was new. We'd always had an unspoken openness. She used to leave her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered, while she cooked, while she napped. Suddenly, it was always with her. Face down. Locked. Silent. One night, I asked her casually if she'd seen a message I'd sent earlier. Just a meme, something dumb about cats and laundry, and she said she hadn't even looked at her phone all day. But I'd seen it in her hand not an hour before, glowing in the hallway. She was standing near the staircase, tapping quickly, grinning. When she realized I'd come around the corner, her face changed in an instant. Like she hadn't meant for me to see that part of her. I told myself I was imagining things. A few days later, I came home early from a job. I wasn't trying to catch her in anything. I just finished up quicker than expected and thought I'd surprise her with lunch. Her car was in the driveway. I walked in and called her name. No answer. I found her in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in hand. She jumped like I'd startled her, quickly locking the screen and smiling too fast. "Didn't hear you come in," she said. I smiled back, but something in me tightened. That night, I lay awake next to her. She'd fallen asleep with her back to me, breathing slow, steady. I stared at the ceiling and tried to talk myself down. We've been married 21 years. We've gone through so much. She would never betray me. She's probably just texting with friends. Maybe she's tired. Maybe she's overwhelmed. But then I started remembering other little things. Like how she suddenly had more late shifts at the boutique. Or how she'd come home wearing perfume she never wore before. How her mood would lift out of nowhere some nights, smiling to herself for no reason, then brushing it off when I asked what was so funny. Sophie started acting a little strange too. Not outright disrespectful, but guarded. She'd close her laptop quickly when I walked into the room. She'd say things like, "Mom's just been stressed lately," or "You're overthinking things, Dad," before I'd even asked anything. It felt rehearsed, like they were on the same page about something I wasn't supposed to read. I didn't want to snoop. I didn't want to be that kind of husband. But I started paying attention. I checked Lydia's mileage one morning. I never do that. But something told me to. The numbers didn't add up. She said she'd just gone to work and back, but there were at least 40 extra miles on the odometer. I asked if she ran any errands, and she paused, just for a second, before saying she'd dropped by a friend's house. "Kara," she said. The name landed in my stomach like a stone. Kara moved to Chicago last year. That night, I sat in my truck after dinner, staring at the steering wheel, feeling something I'd never felt in our marriage before, distrust. I didn't have proof. I didn't have a name. But I had a feeling that wouldn't leave me alone. And it was getting louder. By the time August rolled around, I was starting to live with a permanent knot in my stomach. It sat there like a stone, tightening with every little lie, every late night, every shrug of the shoulders when I asked even the simplest question. Lydia was becoming harder to reach, not just emotionally, but literally. Her responses to my texts were clipped, delayed, or sometimes non-existent. I'd ask how her day went and she'd just say, "Fine, busy," before disappearing into the bedroom with her phone. Some nights she'd laugh quietly to herself while scrolling, then go blank the second I walked in. Like she was switching off a version of herself I wasn't supposed to see. One afternoon I caught her standing in the backyard on a call. She was pacing, barefoot in the grass, the sun setting behind her. Her voice was low, just above a whisper, and she didn't notice me until I opened the door. She actually jumped, then waved her phone at me like it was nothing. "Work stuff," she said. They changed the schedule again. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But something about the way she said it, rehearsed, rushed, like she was hurrying to close a door before I could peek inside. And I knew the boutique closed early on Wednesdays. I knew because I'd picked her up from there dozens of times. I didn't say anything then, just nodded, went back inside, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the untouched plate of leftovers she'd said she was too tired to eat. Sophie wasn't helping either. She was more defensive than usual, and we'd never had that kind of relationship. She used to tell me everything, little stuff, like drama at school or what she was binging on Netflix. But now, she was quieter around me, colder sometimes. And when I tried to talk to her about college, she seemed distracted. Not annoyed, just distant. Like her heart wasn't really in it. "Are you and Mom fighting?" she asked me one night, completely out of the blue. That question knocked the wind out of me. Because we weren't fighting. Not really. We hadn't raised our voices. There hadn't been a blowout or some kind of big moment. Just silence. Distance. Her asking that meant she felt it too. "No," I said, trying to smile. "Why would you think that?" She just shrugged. "I don't know. You've been weird lately." I almost laughed. "I've been weird?" I started watching Lydia more closely. Not in a creepy, obsessive way, at least I don't think it was, but just observant. Her clothes changed a little. She wore more makeup, more perfume. Not the same stuff she used to wear around me, either. It was stronger, flashier. Her phone never left her side, not even when she was cooking or doing laundry. She even started sleeping with it on her nightstand, screen down. She started getting dressed up for work. I'm not talking nice. I'm talking nice. Hair curled, lips done, heels. I asked her once if she had an event at the store, and she just smiled and said, "A girl can dress up for herself, can't she?" Yeah, of course she can. But she wasn't dressing up for me. That much I knew. I didn't have evidence. No lipstick on the collar, no strange numbers, no receipts that didn't match. But I felt it. I felt it in my chest, in my bones, in the quiet look she gave me that didn't linger like they used to. Something was wrong. I just hadn't figured out what it was yet. It's strange how quiet a house can feel when the people in it stop talking to you. Not in the dramatic, yelling and slam doors kind of way. Just quiet. The kind of silence where you're not invited in anymore. Where conversations happen in low voices behind closed doors. Where laughter trails off the second you walk into a room. That was my house. Lydia and Sophie were whispering more now, sharing glances I didn't understand. When I asked what they were talking about, Sophie would say, "Just stuff," or Lydia would smile and say, "Girl things." That used to be enough for me. But now, every vague answer felt like another door shutting in my face. I'd always considered myself a calm guy. Not jealous. Not controlling. I trusted Lydia because she'd earned it over 2 decades. But now I was finding myself doing things I never imagined I'd do. Checking our shared calendar to see if her shifts matched up with what she'd told me. Glancing at our credit card statements. Looking for something. Anything. A crack in the story. And the worst part? I felt guilty for even doing that. Like I was betraying her, somehow. Like I was the one sneaking around. But I couldn't shake the feeling. She had this way of disappearing emotionally when she was home. She'd sit in the living room with her feet tucked under her, scrolling endlessly on her phone, barely noticing when I sat down next to her. No more casual hand on my knee. No more reaching for me without thinking. I started keeping track of how often she touched me, like I was measuring oxygen. Days would go by. Nothing. Even Sophie started acting different. She never used to shut me out. We were close, especially during those early teenage years when everything felt too big for her to carry alone. I was the one she called when she forgot her lunch. I was the one she came to when she didn't know how to respond to a text from a boy. And now? Now she barely looked at me when we crossed paths in the hallway. One night, I came home earlier than usual. I'd wrapped up a service call in record time, and I thought I'd bring home takeout, try to shake the tension somehow. I walked in quietly. The house was dim. I heard Lydia's voice, soft, playful, and Sophie laughing. They were in the kitchen, standing close together, staring at something on Lydia's phone. Whatever it was, it made Lydia blush and cover her mouth. Sophie nudged her, grinning. When they noticed me, they both stiffened. The phone disappeared into Lydia's back pocket like it had a parachute. Sophie cleared her throat and said, "Hey, Dad," like she'd been caught sneaking out, not like she was sharing some secret with her mom. "What's going on?" I asked. Lydia said, "Just looking at memes." Sophie added, "You wouldn't get it." That one stung. It was a joke. A dumb, casual joke. But the way she said it felt loaded, like I was no longer on the inside. After dinner, they both disappeared into Lydia's room, door shut. I sat alone at the table, their plates still warm, the silence loud in my ears. I tried to tell myself this was just a phase, that it would pass, that once Sophie moved into her dorm, things would settle, that Lydia was just tired, stretched thin, maybe going through something she didn't know how to talk about. But another part of me, the one I didn't want to listen to, was starting to scream. What if it's not a phase? What if I'm the only one who doesn't know the truth? My birthday was last Thursday. I woke up to an empty kitchen. No coffee brewing. No card on the table. No sound of anyone getting ready. Just me, the fridge humming, and the strange weight in my chest that had been there for weeks, but heavier now. Still, I made excuses. Maybe they were planning something. Maybe they were going to surprise me later in the day. I didn't want a party. I didn't expect balloons. But I thought I'd at least get a happy birthday. I didn't. Lydia didn't text. Sophie didn't mention it when she came downstairs. They both sat at the kitchen table with their phones, barely acknowledging me. I poured myself coffee, waiting. Maybe they were pretending to forget, setting up something upstairs. But no, it wasn't that kind of silence. This wasn't suspense. This was dismissal. By noon, I stopped pretending. I went out back and sat on the porch. No texts from friends either. Lydia usually reminded them. Not this year. Around 3 p.m., the two of them came outside. Lydia first. Sophie behind her, arms crossed. They both stood there, not smiling. Lydia didn't even look nervous. She looked done, like she was clocking out of a shift. "We need to talk," Lydia said. I nodded, still not saying anything. My heart was beating too fast. She stood in front of me, arms folded like she was bracing herself. "I've been seeing someone," she said. Just like that. No hesitation. No build-up. She didn't try to soften the blow or explain or apologize. She just dropped it into the air like a brick. I stared at her. My ears rang. She kept going. "We've been together for a while. It's serious. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, but it did. And I'm not sorry." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My hands were shaking. Then Sophie stepped in front of me. Her voice was clear, direct. "He's better than you," she said. "Mom deserves someone who actually sees her. Someone who isn't just stuck in his little world of tools and bills and small talk." I blinked at her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I couldn't breathe. "You're a loser," she added. "We're leaving." I thought I was going to pass out. Lydia stepped forward, her voice flatter now. "His name's Chris. We're moving in with him today. He has a place. It's better for all of us. All of us." That's what gutted me. They turned, just like that, and walked inside to grab their things. No hesitation. No shame. Just movement. Just decisions already made. I sat there frozen on the porch, listening through the open window as they laughed. Actually laughed. Lydia told Sophie to grab the bag from the closet. Sophie said something about not needing half the junk in her room. They were light. Free. I was the one crumbling. They walked out the front door 10 minutes later. Lydia didn't say goodbye. Sophie didn't even glance at me. They loaded the trunk of Lydia's new car, the one I'd given her. She didn't look back once. She just drove off. And that's how my birthday ended. No cake. No hugs. Just the sound of tires on pavement, and the echo of the door shutting behind them. I didn't move from that porch for nearly an hour after they drove away. The sun was going down, and the sky turned that washed-out gray-blue that always makes the house look lonelier than it is. I remember watching their taillights vanish at the end of our street and just sitting there, staring at nothing. I wasn't crying. Not yet. My face was numb. My thoughts hollow. All I could hear was Sophie's voice, her calling me a loser, standing beside her mother like she wasn't just leaving her father but helping destroy him in the process. They walked away like they were already living a better life, like I was just some old chapter they didn't need to read again. But sometime after the sun disappeared and the quiet turned thick, something in me shifted. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't shock anymore. It was cold, solid, sharp in my chest. I stood up, went inside, and closed the front door like I was sealing a vault. Then I walked straight to the kitchen, sat down at the table, and opened my laptop. I logged into the tuition portal for Sophie's university. I had set up autopay for her first year months ago. It was scheduled to process next week. One click, and I canceled it. She was 18, legally an adult. She chose her side. And I wasn't going to bankroll the lifestyle of someone who spat in my face on my own birthday. Next was the car. I still had the paperwork, still had access to the registration and title. It was in my name, not Lydia's. I called the insurance company, filed a claim for immediate removal, and notified them the vehicle was no longer in my possession. Then I froze the bank card I knew she used. She'd taken thousands from our joint account over the past few months, little withdrawals, transfers, purchases that never made sense, but I was too trusting to question. Now I saw them for what they were: prep work, building her exit on my dime. I moved through the house like a man on fire, not frantic, but focused, clinical. I took every piece of clothing they left behind, every makeup bag, every sweatshirt, every little framed picture Sophie had taped up in the hallway, and I threw them in a pile by the window. I opened it wide and started tossing everything out. Not carelessly, but deliberately. One item at a time. Let the neighbors watch. Let them whisper. Let them see what betrayal looks like in real time. There were bags, 3 of them, that Lydia had clearly forgotten in her rush. One of them still had her perfume inside, the expensive one I'd given her 2 anniversaries ago. I stood there holding it for a second, feeling the weight of it, how familiar it smelled, how many nights I'd smelled it on her neck while she pretended everything was normal. Then I opened the cap, walked to the sink, and dumped it out. Every last drop. The phone started ringing later that night. Lydia. Then Sophie. Over and over. I didn't answer. I didn't even listen to the voicemails. I blocked their numbers, deleted the call logs, and went to bed in the guest room. I couldn't sleep in the bed where I used to lie awake wondering if I was imagining everything, wondering if I was the problem. The next morning, I woke up to a long email from Lydia. She tried to sound composed, like this was all more complicated than I was making it. She said she didn't want it to be hostile, that we could handle things maturely and figure out a way forward. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to figure out. She made her choice. And so did I. I'm not proud of how good it felt. Taking things back. Cutting her off. Ending the charade. But I won't lie, it felt like survival. Like breathing for the first time in weeks. Because the truth is, I wasn't just angry. I was free. They walked out like I didn't matter. Now they know what it feels like to be left behind. It's strange how quickly silence becomes comfortable again. Not the heavy, suffocating silence from before, the kind that filled the house while Lydia and Sophie were slipping away from me in plain sight. No, this was a quieter kind of quiet. A clean one. A silence that didn't carry judgment or secrets. Just air and space and the sound of my own breathing. The days after I cut them off were blurry at first. My phone stayed silent, except for unknown numbers I refused to answer. I took off work for a while, told my guys to handle the calls, and disappeared into my own little world. I walked the neighborhood in the mornings before the sun came up. I'd drink my coffee on the porch with nothing but the sound of birds and distant traffic. And slowly, something I hadn't felt in a long time crept back into my chest: peace. It wasn't happiness. Not yet. But it was the beginning of it. The blueprint, maybe. I sold Lydia's car within the week. Paid off the remaining balance, signed the title over to a dealer who gave me a decent offer, and never looked back. With the money I'd saved from canceling Sophie's tuition, I started putting plans together. I didn't want to live in that house anymore. Not because of ghosts. I'd already thrown those out the window, but because it just didn't feel like mine. Not really. Everything in it had been arranged around them, shaped for their comfort. Even the curtains Lydia picked out. Even the color on the walls. I was ready to build something that belonged to me. I listed the house quietly, through a friend of a friend who works in real estate. No open houses, no public signs. I wasn't running. I was just ready. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I met Claire. I wasn't looking. Honestly, I didn't even realize I was still capable of feeling that spark again. She was a receptionist at my dentist's office. I'd cracked a molar the same week everything fell apart, and I remember sitting in the waiting room, filling out the same form for the 5th time, when I heard her laugh. It was light and sharp and a little mischievous. She was on the phone, gently teasing someone about double booking a cleaning, and when she looked up and saw me smirking at the conversation, she smiled like I was in on the joke. That's how it started. Just a smile. A laugh. A weird kind of normal after months of walking through fire. We didn't go out right away. I wasn't ready. But we talked. A lot. Over coffee at first. Then long walks. Then dinner. She was divorced too, years ago. Said she knew the feeling of walking into a quiet house and wondering if you'd ever feel at home again. Claire didn't ask for details. She never pushed. She just listened. And I found myself telling her things I hadn't told anyone, not even in those therapy appointments I tried right after Lydia left. With Claire, it wasn't about fixing me. It was just about being seen again. She's not a replacement. I don't want that, and she wouldn't want to be. But she's something I didn't know I needed. A A reminder that I'm still allowed to laugh, still allowed to want things, that there's life after being gutted. And maybe most importantly, she doesn't make me feel like I'm less than. I never realized how much I'd been shrinking over the years, how much of myself I'd given up in the name of keeping peace. With Claire, I'm just me. And that's enough. There's still a road ahead, still healing to do. But for the first time in what feels like forever, I'm walking it with my head up. It's been a few months now. Not long in the grand scheme of life, but long enough for the dust to settle. Long enough to see things clearly for what they were. Not just the betrayal, but the patterns, the silences, the small ways I was being pulled out of my own life long before I noticed. Lydia hasn't tried to reach out again. After that one email, she must have realized I wasn't going to entertain some polite negotiation. Sophie sent one message from a new number, a short one, saying she hoped I was okay and asking if we could talk. I didn't reply. Not out of hatred, but because I needed space. Real space. The kind that doesn't allow reopening wounds that haven't even finished closing. It's a strange thing, grieving people who are still alive. People you loved. People who said your name every day. You don't get a funeral for that. There's no procession. No community meal. Just quiet moments where you sit on your bed, staring at the wall, remembering the way their voice sounded when they were proud of you. The way their face lit up when they were telling you something small, something that mattered only because it mattered to them, and that used to be enough for you. I went through every photo in the house. Every one of Lydia, every one of Sophie. I didn't throw them away. I put them in a box, labeled it with the year, and stored it in the attic. Maybe someday I'll be able to look at them and feel something other than loss. Maybe not. But I couldn't let them sit out in the open like they still belonged to my present. The house sold quickly. I moved into a smaller place about 20 minutes out of town. It's not flashy. Just a one-story, quiet street. Decent yard. But it's mine. I picked the furniture. I painted the walls. Every piece in it carries no memory but the one I'm building now. And that matters more than I ever thought it would. Claire's still around. We're taking things slow. No labels, no pressure. We meet for breakfast on Sundays, walk through antique stores, argue playfully about which type of dog is best. She's calm in a way that makes me want to be better, not for her, but for me. She doesn't ask me to explain my silences. She just sits with them when they come. That's a gift I never knew I needed. If you'd told me a year ago that my wife and daughter would walk out on me for another man, and that I'd survive it, I would have laughed in disbelief. I thought I'd build a life that was unshakable. I thought love was a kind of insurance policy against this kind of loneliness. But I was wrong. Not about love itself, but about where I put it. I handed it to people who didn't hold it with care. And still, I'm standing. Some nights I sit on my new porch with a cold beer and just breathe in the quiet. No voices behind closed doors. No half-truths hanging in the air. Just the hum of the world, the sound of my own peace settling in. I lost a lot. But what I found in the aftermath was something I hadn't felt in a long, long time myself. So to anyone reading this, wondering if you'll make it through your version of heartbreak, you will. You'll limp at first. You'll wake up angry, confused, heartbroken beyond words. But then one morning, you'll pour yourself coffee, realize you're humming again, and it'll hit you. You're still here. And somehow that's enough. It was never about revenge. It was always about freedom.